Good Monday, everyone.
Hello. It's just another Monday.
Just another one of those manic Mondays.
Yeah,
And this is episode 202.
202.
Today we're talking about the scales of justice.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, hey, you know what? On Friday, there was a very cool numerology thing that we
yeah,
did
the,
not
the
talk
21
about.
thing.
Yeah, yeah. So it was the 21st day of the
hmm
21st week of the
hmm
21st year of the 21st century.
Well, and then a 921 would have been the 21st minute of the 21st hour of the 21st day of the 21st whatever.
Oof. Yeah.
I want to believe, like I'm not really big into those sorts of number things, but part of me wants to believe that somewhere, maybe on the 21st parallel and 21st whatever, like
Right,
that
right.
right there, like somehow a wormhole opened.
Just for a second.
Yeah, and that anybody who was there would have been like gone to the 21st counter reality or something.
That'd be great.
That'd be so sweet.
I'd take it.
I
I'd take
mean,
it.
I'd take my odds with an alternate reality. I'm like, I don't know how much. I mean, it could probably be worse, but it could also be a lot better. So, like,
Right.
where are we in the balance of that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I mean, being from and having spent a lot of time in Northwest Minnesota, we know, right? It could always be worse. I mean, that's the mantra in that part of the world.
That's so true. Gus asks, did we settle on Morose Monday? No, damn it. This is Marvelous Monday.
Marvelous
Yeah, I'm
Monday.
gonna go
Could
against
it be?
branding. Gonna go against our ineffective and angry branding.
Could it be Marculous Monday?
Uh, yeah, Marculous. That would I don't. Is that what is the definition of that word?
I don't know.
Marvelous in a Mark-like way.
It's how wonderful Mark is.
I'm Marculous. Immaculate.
All right.
We're just far afield right now.
Far,
Far afield.
far,
We should
far
introduce
afield.
ourselves and then pivot
Right.
towards content
Yes.
on this Marculous Monday. I'm Mark, the Marculous One Van Steenwyck, and I direct the Center for Prophetic Imagination.
And I'm Daniel Wolpert. I don't have a day named after me.
No, yeah, Dan the Dandy. How about that? Dan the Dandy Wolpert.
Yeah, that's very British. Very
Yes.
British. You'd have to say that with your British accent voice.
My British accent.
Yeah.
I don't even want to try right now because that would be so
Okay.
bad.
All right. And I direct the Minnesota Institute of Contemplation and Healing. And yeah, good morning to Kathleen and James. Anybody else that is listening, I feel sorry for you right now.
Yeah, especially if you don't know who the hell we are. Like people who know us, like you have patience with people you know saying dumb things. But whenever you don't know them, like why would I even watch the rest of this?
Why would I do this?
Well, you gotta have faith that it only gets better.
There we go. So anyway,
Michael writes, "Flippin' eck, that's funny." Like I'm sure I should have said that with a Cockney accent, but I'm not even going to try. Yeah. Anyways,
so this week's topic was actually a listener suggested topic.
From
so
Ellen.
last Friday, Ellen threw up a comment. Actually, we'd gone off of air already, but we saw it. It came up. And it was about, are you going to talk about any of these Supreme Court cases that are coming up? And so we thought, well, that would be great, and especially because this week is a year since George Floyd was murdered.
Oh my God!
The anniversary is tomorrow, and but last year it was on a Monday, so Monday evening, I started getting these messages and seeing this thing that something bad had happened at our bus stop. And, within a few days, this had exploded. And I gave a little Pentecost reflection yesterday from up on the corner video that I put on my Facebook page. Because this really was a Pentecostal event. There's no question about that. And of course, a lot of it is related to this issue of justice and what does that mean, and who gets it and who doesn't, and how does that work? And and the GOP has been working valiantly for the last number of years to put folks of their ilk on the courts.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we've got this a big abortion case that they're going to take up from this Mississippi law. And, so what's going on with all of this, and how is this working? So that's what we're going to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Lori. Oh, Lori still has her purple balloons.
My purple balloons still have enough air.
All right. Yeah. And
So
200 of them, are they still packed in your living room? So
how many hot air balloons, like how many helium balloons would it take for me to float? How many of those balloons? I don't know.
It's funny. I often wondered about that as a kid. I thought, how many of those, because they do not have a lot of lift.
No, they barely have enough lift for themselves, so it would take a lot.
Yeah, I think you'd need like thousands of them. But then the problem is that the weight of the strings would start to kind of counteract the lift. It'd be an interesting little physics problem. Somebody wants to work on that.
That'd be a good science fair project, is what it'd be.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah. This justice issue, like we were talking before, like there's so many angles to this. Like one is, at its base, there's this kind of assumption that criminality equals immorality. And so therefore a criminal is a bad person, and someone who's law abiding is a good person. Which is kind of the base level of this, like kind of weird conditioning that we have that is really messed up, because it's not, it doesn't correspond to reality. And so then from there, like if you already have that premise, then this whole entire carceral system, and just to define terms, carceral system would be a way of talking about this, everything from policing to the soft policing of cops hanging out with kids in the park, to the prosecution, to like the attorney general, the courts, the whole system of law and order as a carceral system.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I would say that there's even more of sort of a base level of this, which is that in people's minds, there is this assumption that we understand what that word criminal means.
Yes.
And that term defines some objective state. And so one of the things I was saying beforehand is that, so I've got a friend in Northwest Minnesota who's a journalist, and now he's an independent journalist. And he's actually used a number of little videos that I've made over this last year. And so he had something this weekend about that it was the year anniversary, and he had some pictures from the corner from George Floyd Square. And, and one of the comments was, what is this world coming to? We're memorializing a criminal. Right. And that is one of the things that you hear in the, Fox News orbit. Right. So George Floyd is a criminal. And rarely do people say this, but of course the implication is, so he deserved what he got.
That's the implication. Totally right. The implication.
Yeah, that's the implication.
Like, and what is he a criminal? Like, what laws did he really break? Like, let's just think about this. Like, any crimes that he had were like that somehow that we jump automatically to that. Therefore, the death sentence was just. Like, I heard this in protests. You're blocking the interstate, so it's your own fault if you get run over and killed. I'm like, for jaywalking, like this sort of And this is like tied, like I just want to insert this in there because it's a huge, strange part of it. Like there's this evangelical doctrine, and there may be other Christian types that have it, but it's very evangelical. The idea that all sins are equal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's based off of this biblical text that if you've broken the law in one way, you've broken the law in its entirety, which is a rhetorical argument that people they miss the nuance of it altogether. And so somehow if you masturbated when you were 13, then God is righteous in sending you to hell. Like that logic then applied towards George Floyd did drugs, therefore deserves to die.
Right. And so this is where I say though that a big part of this, so people say that and hear that, and then immediately you're caught in the argument of, okay, so somehow I have to talk about George Floyd being a criminal.
Yes.
Now, so there were two quote crimes that got brought up in relation to him. So one was the issue of the fake $20 bill, and then the other was this issue of him using different substances, right? And so the example that I immediately think of course, is the area where I grew up. So I grew up in West LA, and the sort of range of income in the area where I grew up was, solidly middle class to extremely upper class, and mostly white. And there were drugs everywhere. I mean, there were tons of drugs. And in fact, the interesting thing is the richer neighborhoods had more drugs.
Yeah, because you can afford more drugs if you're rich. Like it's basic economics.
Well, and it had to do with the celebrity culture, with the movie culture, with the music culture, with all that. I mean, so Beverly Hills and Bel Air, which were the two neighboring little municipalities next to West LA, two of them, are just awash in drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, did you have drug raids there? Did you have the LAPD coming in with tanks and knocking down people's doors? Did you have SWAT teams, coming through people's roofs? No, you did not. and so, yeah, really a big surprise, right? And so the question is, are those people criminals? Right? Well, I can tell you, in those people's minds, they were not criminals. They were just having fun. And so I bring this up because it's very important to me that we really have to critique in our own mind when we use that term criminal. Who are we thinking about and why?
Yeah. And it's to the point, like, I saw this a lot. Progressives, liberals, not very many radicals, I think, because people who orient towards the far left don't usually think this way. But when people would like make a point of critiquing Donald Trump because he's a criminal, it's to me like I get the argument, but it falls into this logic of somehow breaking the laws of the United States is what constitutes someone being a bad person, which is so flawed. Like, because here, let's be honest. I'm not going to get specific for obvious reasons, but I am theoretically a felon because of some of the things I've done. Have I been arrested for it? No. And I'm not going to tell you what those things are. But Jeff Bezos is not a criminal. Donald Trump is barely a criminal. Like, he hasn't. A lot of the powerful people who have a lot of power over the system, who have done horrible injustices, are not criminals, but I am. And I've been arrested for some of these things. Mm-hmm. And so therefore I'm a criminal. And you know who else? Like this, this is where we were at. This is what we were talking about before we went live. Gus writes, Jesus called the Christ was a criminal. I mean, like, he got what he deserved. It's weird that we're making memorials for criminals now. Jesus was a criminal, not only according to the Roman system, but I mean, this is controversial. People freak out when you say this, but even according to the law of Moses, you could really build a case that he was a criminal. There's no
Well,
way he was not a criminal.
I mean, you wouldn't have to build a case.
No,
People
but like
pointed it out to him all the time.
but but people who are invested in this idea that Jesus was flawless, which I'm not going to argue against that. Let's say he's without sin. Let's just grant that, because I don't have a real big issue to not accept that. But if we accept that, somehow people in their minds have to say that he wasn't a criminal, but like he totally fucking was a criminal.
Right.
Like in every sense of that word, according to the laws of Moses and the laws of Rome.
Right.
But we can't even get there.
So and so the point of this really is, right, that so what does that word mean? That word does not mean, as you're pointing out, some abstract, objective, ethical or moral standard, right? Which is what we do with that word, but that's not what the word means.
Yeah.
The word basically just means that a social system has caught and labeled and convicted you. That's what it means.
That's what it means.
Right? And if you haven't been caught and you haven't been labeled, you go around feeling free to think that you're not a criminal, even if you're doing the exact same thing as the people who are caught and labeled and convicted.
Well, and this is so you've kind of alluded to this, but haven't said it this starkly. But a lot of this is really tied up in race and class. Like the issue is, even if you haven't been convicted, if you're a person of color, and you look and act in a certain way to white people, they'll just assume you're a criminal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is kind of how it works. Same with, and just to make it, it's not just about race, because like the truth is, if you're a white person living in a trailer court and you have 2 dogs tied in front of your trailer house, people assume you're a criminal too.
Up in the yard.
Yeah, people assume like you're a criminal. Like it really is tied up in race and class and other factors as well, like the way you speak. Like, this is one of my sticky wickets, the cussing thing. People assume that if you cuss, that you're somehow a lesser person, which is part of the reason why I intentionally cuss. It's because fuck that. Like that's really like because I have like some high functioning oppositional defiance going on. But like there's all sorts of layers to this that people don't really interrogate. Mm-hmm. And so when somebody who has been deemed a criminal by official standards dies, like you see this, and this is America's always been a little bit like this, but really a lot of this is the fruit of especially the 70s, 80s, 90s, the sort of war on drugs, the kind of law and order stuff is really cemented more and more in people's minds, this framework. And maybe it's always been there, but it seems like it's intensified. And then as it's become wedded to the evangelical kind of Christianity, it's become really locked in that if somehow you smoke crack, you're someone who deserves to die.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I can promise you that, because you can go to Minnetonka, which is the upper class suburb of Minneapolis.
There's a big lake there, and that's where if you are affluent, you might have what would consider like a lake yacht type thing, like a really big boat where you can go underneath into, like on a lake. Which if you're from Minnesota, we have lots of lakes, but it's one of the fancier lakes.
Yeah, and I can guarantee you there are plenty of people running around Minnetonka that are on opioids, and I can guarantee you that if one of those people was handcuffed and pinned to the ground and killed by a cop, you would not have a lot of white folks going, well, they were a criminal, they deserve to die. Right.
I've shared this anecdote before, but when I was arrested for wiping fake blood on the courthouse, I was in this holding cell with 20-some people, and it was a small room. We were sitting cheek to cheek pretty much, and it stank, right? So they clearly don't care about any nice thing. And there's a toilet in the corner where you don't have any privacy. And everyone there, like I was there for some sort of ethical stand, and so I was treated nicely. And I also, to be fair, came in with a clergy collar on, so I was treated nicely, and I'm white. So I'm just acknowledging that. But almost everyone else was there for like having a little bit of pot, the guy who fell asleep in the bus depot, drunk and disorderly, that kind of thing. And then there was a guy from Wayzata, which is next to Minnetonka, who was there for a DUI. And the dude was clearly affluent. and he was the only one really loudly complaining. So even that shows that somehow he thought he was above everyone else in there. And most people would. Most people in our society would probably acknowledge that too. It's like, well, he had one too many to drink. That's not a big deal. But these people, they're dirty people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we got a couple comments.
A Kathleen comment.
Welcome more comments.
We always love Kathleen's comments. We live in an area where there are periodic rolling gun battles. I don't know why I'm laughing, but these stories are so such case. It's like everything you write should fit in a Flannery O'Connor novel. That's basically, I guess I'll leave it at that. People talk about not feeling safe, yet the greater threat is having our accounts hacked and being driven downward economically by people like Bezos.
Right. Yeah. I just read this amazing article over the weekend about this guy that is, he's an architect, and he's critiquing billionaire culture and what that's doing to the world. And the title, I think he's written this book. So the title is great. It's Zombie Neighborhoods, Iceberg Houses, Razor Thin High Rises. Right? And so those are the three things that are happening with billionaire housing, right? So the zombie neighborhoods are, and I've actually been in one of these, and I think I've talked about this before, are these neighborhoods with these mega houses and there's nobody there, right? Because the billionaires are flying around the world to all these places.
They've got a bunch of houses and places.
Yeah, so they've got these, and again, it's not just houses, right? I mean, when you think of houses,
they're complexes of some sort.
Like they're complexes, and they're massive, and you walk through and you can feel that nobody's there. And so this is taking up this massive amount of property in cities, right? So it's expelling all these people. I mean, it's the biblical thing, you shall dwell alone in the land, and that's a sin, right? And then the iceberg houses are what the uber rich are doing is they build a house on the surface, but then they have several floors underground that are massive. And they have tennis courts, and they have huge garages for all their antique cars. And so it's like an iceberg, is that there's far more square.
That's a trend? I thought that was just like a Batman thing.
No, that is a trend. And there's far more square footage underground than above ground. And then you get these new high rises, and actually they're building one in Minneapolis, but there are a few in New York. These super thin, because what the uber rich want is they want an apartment that's the entire floor, so they have a 360-degree view. Mm-hmm. And basically all these things are wreaking havoc in these urban environments, right? Driving up land prices, housing prices, all of this, making it totally unaffordable. Right? Now, we don't call this a crime, right? We don't call this criminal behavior, right? We call this good business, right? Capitalism, return on investment. Right? And so yeah, exactly, Kathleen. We look at these certain behaviors that get labeled criminal, and then behaviors that are far more detrimental to a far greater number of people are not labeled as criminal.
Well, some of this is tied
and people buy into it.
Yeah. Touching on the class thing, which, you're painting this picture, and it's more and more people in our society are seeing those things as gross, but still, it really is a deeply American way of thinking to treat the super wealthy as heroes. It's not something that is as common in other parts of the world. The Vanderbilts and Rockefellers, we might talk of them negatively, but generally, there's documentaries about them because we heroize them. And I like to tell this joke, the difference between the American and the Irish view of wealth.
No.
An American man walks by a mansion on a hill and points to it and says, "Someday I'm going to be that man." an Irishman walks by a mansion on the hill and says, "Someday I'm going to kill that bastard." And I think there's a lot to that. It's kind of a, I'm sure I'll get in trouble for saying
Although,
the bastard.
yes. All right. Seymour has an advertising slogan for
Transmission
us.
soundbite: I am a criminal. It's the opposite of a Nixon soundbite.
That's right.
CK writes, "The true criminals are the ones creating the laws. Fuck that shit."
No.
I agree with the sentiment. Neil writes, "Meth addiction among white people is a health crisis. Meth possession by POC or even poor whites is a crime." I mean, yeah, that's the logic.
Yeah. Yeah, and so to me, what's really important as a starting point, we've spent basically the entire episode on this one thing, and during the week, we'll get into more details around specific issues, but to me, really spending a lot of time looking at this very clearly is important, because it is such an embedded, we've talked so much about formation and critiquing our own formation and awareness and spiritual practice. This is one of the things that is so embedded in our formational state, right? Who are the good guys and who are the bad guys? And it starts off from when you're a little kid, and you play good guys and bad guys and cops and robbers and
cowboys and Indians.
I'm sure in some places people are still playing cowboys and Indians, and we learn all of the typology of a criminal, and it gets so embedded that, right, when somebody looks at George Floyd, they just go, criminal, loser, bad person. I don't really care what has happened to them, right? And we look at somebody else who fits a different profile, who's doing 10 times the amount of worse stuff,
like that.
And we
weird,
go,
what's that dude, that young dude, the Olympic rapist swimmer guy? Remember that guy?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I can't remember his name, which is great.
Yeah.
But that was an example. Like, a lot of people defend him. Like, we don't want his life shouldn't be ruined over a mistake. Is a lot of thing you hear about young white men.
Yep. Yep.
I've never really heard those same people say George Floyd's life shouldn't have been ruined over a mistake. And let's ask why. And
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Karen knows his name. Right. Brock Turner.
Yeah, Brock. I knew it was Brock or Brett or something. Yeah. Sorry for that. I have friends who are named Brett. I'm sorry, but it's a white ass name.
Yeah. He was a Stanford student. Right. No, exactly. I mean, nobody says to, oh, gee, George Floyd, we shouldn't ruin his life over a $20 bill. Right. All right. Couple more comments.
Some good suggestions from librarian Gus here. If folks want a couple fantastic or fanatic books, I think you mean fantastic, on how the carceral system functions and how it has become the monster it's grown into in the last 4 years, I recommend 2 books. Of course, Michelle Alexander's modern classic, The New Jim Crow, landmark book, and Ruth Wilson Gilmore's Golden Gulag, which I actually haven't heard of that. So thanks for the recommendation. Check those out. I pretty much trust anything Gus recommends as being good. So check it out. Seymour
That's why he's our official librarian.
Official, yeah. We pay him the big bucks for it too. This convo is a stark reminder that Fox News talking points are common. I'm assuming that asterisked out thing is a U, not an O. Talking point are common outside of evil right wingers or whatever. So many quiet, white, well-meaning liberals share sentiments of crime and punishment. I mean, that's a great point. Like, often what happens in sort of the progressive or left of center within the American context wing is like acknowledges everything conservatives say, but thinks we should be more lenient about it. Like, that's often the shape it takes. Like, that's the Joe Biden approach, Like, I don't want to be a dick about it, but that guy should go to jail. Like that kind of thinking, instead of interrogating the whole system as a whole.
Right.
And to be
A
very Christian
kinder,
about it.
gentler, yeah.
And to be very Christian about it. Like, I've never, ever, ever taught my son to be law abiding. I've taught him to be compassionate, loving, patient, kind, gentle, long suffering, self controlled, like the fruits of the Spirit. And for those who follow, this is Paul's teaching, and I take this very literally in a very evangelical sense. For those who follow the fruits of the Spirit, there is no law. Like, it's a very anarchic way of thinking that if you are actually pursuing the things of the Spirit, fuck the law. Like, that's kind of how I take it, and that's really how I think we should all take it. If you're compassionate and loving, then I don't care if you're a felon. Ed writes, conservatives call out Hollywood for portraying the rich in a bad light. That's so true. Yes.
Right.
It's kind of hilarious. Lori writes, I need to have a beer with Mark. Marvelous Monday. Did I spell it right, Dan?
No, it's Markulus. So Markulus.
I welcome beer fellowship anytime.
Yeah.
Seymour writes, I think of so many people who use designer drugs as opposed to drugs that are accessible to the poor. That's old hat. They all know their kids are doing them. Kids will be kids or whatever, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Ed writes, they call out the Muppet movie, etc. What? I don't understand. I don't know what the connection you're making with the Muppet movie. Like, what? I want to know. I try to avoid conservative outrage. I was telling Dan before this, I have a bit of stupidity fatigue. Like, so I just don't want to dig into it. But I now I'm curious. Like, what's with the Muppet movie that makes conservatives upset?
Gus wants to know that.
Spill the beans.
I mean, I don't know that it has to do with economics. It doesn't have to do with the fact originally that they had like a gay character. They were nice to gay people or something.
In the Muppet movie? I guess I haven't.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. I want to know more. Seymour writes, I don't want to be sick about it, but these people deserve to die. Yeah. I mean, I think maybe I don't want to be a dick about it, but those people deserve to die. That's how I'm interpreting it.
Yeah. So this is a really helpful to me beginning to all of this, and I think that because if we're looking at these court cases, and we can get into that more on Wednesday and Friday, this all really plays out, and particularly around the abortion issue. This very much is about this moralizing equals criminalizing, and a certain kind of moralizing equals criminalizing. But it's helpful to just start out with the recognition that our ideas about these things are so formed by whatever social system we're growing up in.
That's right. And there's so many layers to this. And like, as always, we barely will scratch the surface, but I think it's important especially for Christianity in America. If Christianity is going to be useful at all towards the struggle for justice, then we need to decouple it from the sort of legalized moralizing that we have. Last comment from Catherine. I've been waiting for this. Fun/infuriating exercise. Watch a show or movie and pause it after it establishes a bad guy, minor side character. Okay. Discuss how you were shown they were the bad guy and worthy of immediate punishment by Batman, Tony Stark, the fantasy FBI, etc. How long did it take on screen to establish their bad guyness? What common stereotypes or fears did the writers play on? This is a great exercise, and a perfect example within the Marvel Cinematic Universe is the dude, Michael Keaton's character of the Vulture, stole alien technology and sold weapons to like criminals and is the evil guy. Tony Stark creates weapons and sells it to governments and is the good guy. Like, let's just think about that. It's a great example of what Catherine said.
That was great. I'm sensing a curriculum in the making, Catherine. So, all right.
We will see you all on Wednesday.
See you on Wednesday.
We're going to get into more criminality.
More criminality.
And we'll see you then.
All right. Bye.